Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 215 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. It's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we got a small crew this week. Richard couldn't be here with us, so I'm joined by Crim. How's it going today, Crim?
Hey, morning Seth, how's it going?
Going well, and we got some surprise news. Heading into this podcast, I was a little worried that we wouldn't have much to talk about, but just this morning, we got the deck list for the 2019 edition of the Challenger deck. So we're going to talk Challenger decks. The new edition got the deck list finally today. Also going to mention some modern action. There was a bunch of modern tournaments over the weekends, 2 GPs, I believe, along with an SEG Team Modern Open. So I wanted to talk a little bit about where Modern's at. And then, of course, since we missed Fish Mail last week with Seth Manfield on the podcast, we got a bunch of Fish Mail to get to, which we will get to at the end of the cast. So I think that is our main plan for today. Before we jump into it, a reminder that our show today is brought to you by spikesacademy.com, which has recently launched a new course, The Art of Sideboarding, with Seth Manfield, who was on the podcast last week as a professor, and the first 200 people who get in on the course can get a 15% discount by using the code SIDEBOARDING. So thank you to Spikes Academy for supporting the show. You can find them at spikesacademy.com or at spikes_academy on Twitter. So with that out of the way, let's talk some Challenger decks. So Crim, have you gotten a chance to look over these new decks that just came out this morning? Have you seen them yet?
Yes.
What is your initial take? I'm assuming you saw the ones last year. How do you feel this edition stacks up to our past edition of the Challenger decks?
I mean, this year's edition like really captures like the aggro decks, which is fine. Like the mono white like a dual or deck seems to be pretty good. Like you have the 4 Banalish Marshals, the 2 Benalias, History of Benalia, that is. You have some, it's like actually just pretty much the mono white list, right? Like to a T. But the other decks just seem to be okay. Like the mono red deck only has 1 Phoenix, which is cool, but you do get, I guess, like 4 Goblin Chain Whirlers, which is pretty nice. Otherwise, I'm not too huge on any of the other decks. Like you've looked at the Golgari one, right?
Yeah, I've looked over, and we should probably say before we talk about it too much, the 4 deck lists are actually White Weenie called United Assault, which is pretty similar, and all these decks actually are, Wizard said, were designed based off of Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica, so back in like October, November time, so a few months ago. So it's kind of similar to the deck that LSV top-aided Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica with. So White Weenie, mono red aggro called Lightning Aggro, which you probably know what this one is. Basically a bunch of cheap red things, a bunch of burn spells, Golgari mid-range, which kind of Golgari Explorer theme. The problem with this one, and you're gonna get this, is it does feel a little bit dated to me because of how the deck has evolved. And then the last deck is Arcane Tempo, which is basically, is it Drake's, I guess, or is it Phoenix, sort of? So those are the 4 decks, but go ahead, Grim. What were your thoughts on the Golgari list?
The Golgari list is like, it's cool. I just feel like it doesn't have any of the cards I really want. Like there's no Carnage Tyrants or anything like that. If I were buying this deck, I'd want Carnage Tyrants there. I mean, otherwise, like the Golgari deck doesn't have anything but Vraska, right? Like that's the only thing that's cool, and like maybe the Fine Finalities. And the Arcane Tempo list, it has only 1 Arclight Phoenix, so I'd kind of want a few more than that. Like, you don't have to give me a full playset, but like, I think like maybe 2 Arclight Phoenixes would be pretty sweet.
So, yeah, with the Arcane Tempo deck, I actually did not expect any Arclight Phoenixes, and I was pretty okay with that because, it kind of goes back and forth in Standard how the Drake decks, which build of the Drake deck is most popular. We definitely saw, like, heading into the last Pro Tour Ravnica Allegiance just a few weeks ago, that the most common build of Izzet Drakes wasn't really a Phoenix deck. It was more Enigma Drakes and Crackling Drakes, and that was the style. So, I don't know. The 1 Phoenix doesn't really bother me too much. The big thing about the Izzet deck is, and about all these decks actually, is they're $29.99 $1,999 MSRP. This is, yes, there's no MSRP anymore, but this product was announced before they got rid of MSRP, so it does have MSRP, and they're being sold at some, like, Amazon. Also, I saw Cool Stuff Inc. for a set of all 4 decks for like $85 to $90, which makes them 24 decks, $23 a piece. And the Is It deck in specific, I plugged the numbers into Goldfish just to see how much it was worth, and it's like $122. Like, just Arclight Phoenix is like $30. You get 3 Sulfur Falls is like another $30. You get a couple of Nib Mizzets, which are not super cheap, and then even like the support cards, like Charticourse is like a $2 or $3 uncommon. Same with Lava Coil. So the value, even though, yeah, the one Arclight Phoenix, I can see how that's a little weird, but the value is insane. If you can get this for $25 or $30, like, the single Arclight is worth more than this entire deck is going to cost you, and you get at least a semi-functional deck out of the deal.
Yeah, like, I do like, I'm sure the value, because I wasn't sure how much these were going to be, to buy right right off the shelves. Like, the other ones, I think I was looking at, I mean, I guess I wasn't getting at MSRP, but like all the other ones were like around like $40-50 or something like that, if I recall. Or no, they were like 30.
I think
they were 30.
Yeah, I think some
30.
were more, I'm trying to remember. There was one, I think it had Chandra and Hazaret, which was really expensive. The mono red one or the vehicles one. And I think that one was sold for more than the rest of them. That one might have been like 40 or more, but I think most of them were in the $30 range.
Yeah. For me, I really like just like out of the box. I think like just power level. I think United Assault is probably the best one.
Yeah, I think I would go with one of the 2 aggro decks. If my only concern was I want to pick up this deck, I want to open it up, take it to an F&M and actually be able to compete, I think United Assault is definitely a good option. I also think that Mono Red it looks pretty close to the Mono Red deck that people have been playing. Like, it's got most of the pieces there, so I feel like that's another pretty reasonable option. I was kind of surprised in the Mono Red deck that we actually did get 4 Runaway Steamkins, and one of the things we saw last year with the Challenger decks is it seemed like Wizards focused really heavily on not reprinting playable cards that weren't going to rotate at the next rotation. So I was not really, I was almost thinking they wouldn't do Mono Red at all, because they did Mono Red last year for one thing, but also because Experimental Frenzy and Runaway Steamkin are like key pieces to that deck that are not rotating. So I actually think the Mono Red deck is pretty legitimate as well. The other 2 decks, I think they're good, but I feel like those are decks that, while they'd probably be fine at F&M, to really be near top tier with these decks, it's gonna take a lot of upgrades, and especially Golgari, which Golgari's just not really a thing anymore. Like, I don't know if I've seen anyone play straight Golgari since Hydroid Crosses came out. To upgrade the Deadly Discovery Golgari deck into the current Golgari deck, which is Sultai, that's gonna be a lot of money.
Yeah. Like, you'll need that, you'll need all, like, the lands, specifically the lands, and then the Krasis, of course, and then, you know, they're starting to play, like, 1 to 2 Carnage Tyrants on top of that, so that's, like, Carnage Tyrants, I think, still, like, $20 or something like that.
Yeah, I was actually, so looking at these decks, as far as omissions, I think in the Golgari deck, Carnage Tyrant's a big one. I was thinking they would throw in 1 Carnage Tyrant. It is rotating, and it doesn't really see Modern play or Legacy play or anything, so it seemed like an easy one of, but instead, they went with Vraska, which maybe, I don't know, I guess like casual players like Planeswalkers, and Vraska's fine. The other card that surprised me in that deck is we didn't get any Vraska's Contempts, which is another expensive card that's heavily played, and it's rotating in the fall, so that felt like another easy inclusion in this deck, but they didn't include that one either, so there was a couple of weird omissions. As far as the other decks, I don't know. I'm pretty fine with the 1 Arclight Phoenix. That's one piece of criticism I've seen a lot on social media is, 1 Arclight Phoenix. That's weird. But when you consider, like I said, that some Drake decks don't even play Arclight Phoenix, and you could definitely build Is It Drakes and just trade away your Phoenix and play without that altogether, or trade away your Arclight Phoenix and use it to, like, upgrade your mana base, get your Steam Vents or something, which are probably a better long-term bet than Arclight Phoenix anyway. I feel like that's still, the Arclight Phoenix kind of helps you upgrade if you're willing to trade it away.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's if you were specifically, like, once again, looking to build Drakes, which is fine, but if you wanted to build specifically Arclight Phoenix deck, I think you would still want, you would need to spend like another how much did you say the Phoenixes were? Like $30?
They're
each?
they're like 30-ish each right now, yeah.
Yeah, so you need to still invest like another 90, not including like the Steam vents and stuff like that.
So I'm going to tell you, here is what you do. If you want to play Is It Phoenix, what you do is you just buy 4 copies of this deck, which should be around $100 from the prices we're seeing right now. So you'll get all 4 copies of your Arclight Phoenix, and then you're going to have like 3 extra playsets of Chart a Course, which are like $11 right now. 3 extra playsets of Lava Coil, $11. You're going to get 12 total copies of Sulphur Falls, which are like $9.50 a piece right now. So if you actually went out and buy that, and that doesn't even include, there's 3 Entrancing Melodies in the sideboard, and that card's like almost $5 a copy now because it's seen a lot more play in Standard. So I feel like that's how you build Is It Phoenix out of this, is you just buy 4 copies of this deck, trade away the extra pieces to get your Steam vents and whatever, and you end up having Is It Phoenix, which is, I should probably look at the price. What is the current price of the tier Is It Phoenix deck? Almost $300, $287. You end up getting essentially that deck for $100 or so if you buy 4 copies of this deck and trade away the pieces you don't need.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely go do that. I guess I'm just thinking more like every time I get to these decks, they're never what they sell for like an MSRP. They're always like some kind of fixed price, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I guess it's like 25, but I always find it for like, it's like at the stores, they're like $35 or something like that.
I think that is one of my concerns with the Is It deck is, we've seen in the past that the most popular versions of the Challenger deck sometimes sell out and are harder to find and end up being more expensive. And I think that that's going to be the Is It deck this time, just because of the price tag. Like the fact that you get so much value, $120 of value for $30 or whatever, that means that this deck is something that finance types are going to be looking towards too. Like, even though they're designed for players to pick up and go to F&M, people are going to be after these decks just for the free money. Similar to like the True Name Nemesis Commander deck a while ago. I remember driving to like every Walmart and Target that was in with like, I don't know, an hour or 2 drive and just buying every copy possible because you could sell them for like twice as much as you paid for them. And it was just like such easy money. So, but I'm a little afraid that that will happen with the Is It deck. The other decks, I looked up the prices on those. They're like, they're still worth it. They're like $65 to $80, I think, with Mono White being the cheapest if you had together all the prices. But still, I mean, for $30, and these ones are probably even more likely to not sell out and be at MSRP than the Is It deck, you're still definitely getting your money's worth for any of these decks.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. I did notice though, they left out a control deck, so...
I wanted to ask you about that because I know you're the biggest Teferi supporter on this podcast, and if there's one complaint I've heard from people about these decks, it is no Teferi. Also, no Nexus of Fate, I guess, is like the secondary complaint that some people wanted.
That's fine.
What do you think about that, Crim? Is like the biggest Teferi player I know.
I'm kind of really sad because, well, first off, that would also kind of go hand in hand with like, you know, the missing Vraska's Contempt. Like they can give some kind of Esper deck maybe, but 3 colors does require you to like start throwing in more lands than usual. So you could just do like a blue-white control deck, right? And then you just put a few like I guess 1 or 2 Teferis in, because Teferi on its own is like $50.
Yeah, that's the problem that I've run into is how do you build, like, let's say that they can include a copy of Teferi. Is there any way you can have a 1 Teferi blue-white control deck that would still be at least F&M playable out of the box? Or do you think that that's the sticking point? Like, Teferi decks want 4 Teferis, and just 4 Teferis is like $200, and Wizards isn't going to sell 4 copies of Teferi for $30.
Yeah, you're not getting 4 Teferis, but I guess, as I said, you could build it in like a blue-white shell, and you just, throw like Lyra in there also, right? Like, just like a Teferi, a Lyra, and like, you know, like, Cleansing Novas, is like a few of those for board wipes.
Yeah.
And just like use Sinister Sabotage, right? So you're not like loading it up with rares like Absorb and stuff.
Yeah, and I guess you could have like Nezahal or something like that as a backup finisher, which is cheap and still like a somewhat reasonable control finisher that people use from time to time. If you were an Esper, like Chromium, I guess would be a possibility for a cheap finisher if you can't have 4 Teferis.
The thing about once you bring in the third color, then there's going to be like a lot. There has to be enough right out of the box of a reason for you to even want to buy the 3-color deck, because the 3-color deck would need a decent mana base, Vraska's Contempt, Teferi, those cards on their own would start adding up pretty quick. At least for like $25.
Yeah. No, that's very true. I think you'd end up with a bunch of like guild gates and whatnot, and then how playable is your deck actually going to be if you have to have like 12 guild gates to make the mana work? It's probably going to make it a lot less playable out of the box just because of the mana base, which maybe is why they focus so heavily on 2-color decks this go around. They did throw 1 Shockland in the Golgari deck, so there is a Shockland out there. Otherwise, the other decks were monocolored, so not really much of note in the mana base. So, Crim, you're going to an FNM. You can only play a challenger deck. You're taking the mono white one. Would that be your choice?
Yeah, taking the mono white one for sure.
What about number 2?
I would there's still just enough cards here to play the Drake's deck. Out of the Izzet deck, I'd probably grab that.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good ranking. I think I would probably go mono red is my number 1 choice, and then probably mono white number 2 if my only concern was performing well at F&M. And then I think I would have Golgari at the bottom. I think that might be the biggest loser, I guess, which is funny to say, but none of the valuable cards, you get the Overgrown Tomb. That's the one really chase card, I guess. Woodland Cemetery. The other cards are fine, but they're pretty much just standard rotating cards, like 2 Jadelight Rangers. Sure, they're worth a few bucks right now, but they're not going to be worth anything once they rotate. The Vraska is kind of the same way. So I feel like that's probably the least competitive out of the box, and it probably has the least long-term potential, I guess, especially compared to the Izzet deck, which I think you're getting like $60 for Arclight Phoenix and Sulphur Falls, and that makes it worth it just to build your collection, and the Nivs. If you never even played this deck, it's something that's worth buying if you don't have a big collection, just to like have these cards for Modern, because Arclight Phoenix is like the best deck in Modern. Sulphur Falls is the one check land that's like a Modern staple because Storm decks play it pretty consistently. So I feel like you get just a lot of collection building power from the Izzet deck, even if you don't care about playing it.
I agree. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That's for me, like, I guess when I think of mono red and like out of the box, I just think more like with how much Golgari and Sultai is running around.
Yeah.
I always get worried about playing that deck.
No, that's a good point. Mono red has definitely fallen in the meta a little bit, but I think this deck is actually, like, if you were going to play mono red at a tournament, this deck isn't that far off, at least the main deck, from what you see people running in competitive tournaments if they go with mono red. It's pretty close. Like, mono red isn't great, but you don't have to upgrade that much to have this be the best version of mono red in standard.
Correct. Like, yeah, like as I said, you only need like 4 Skewer the Critics. Like, that's pretty much about it.
And that's a random common that you can get pretty cheaply, so.
Yeah, you'll find that on just like the bulk people leave on tables.
Yeah, pretty easy to pick up.
It's pretty easy. I actually just found a playset laying around. Like, I don't own these. I guess I'll just, sure.
I'll take those, yeah.
Yeah.
Alright, any other challenger deck thoughts, Crim, before we move on and talk some modern action?
No, that we pretty much covered it except for, just no Teferi. That was surprising.
Well,
I was expecting him to get reprinted.
Yeah.
Or, print it in here.
I guess we'll have to wait for a future Masters set or something to get more Teferis. I guess for me, I would say these decks seem like really good buys, especially if you can get them for MSRP. you're getting a couple of pretty playable out of the box decks, and the decks that are less playable or need more upgrades out of the box have a lot of value in them. So if you can pick them up from your LGS for $25, $30, any one of these is a fine buy financially. And the two monocolor ones are probably, in my opinion, the best out of the box for just playing at F&M. Although, as Crim said, the Is It Drake one is not bad either. Like, it's a pretty functional deck. I just avoid Golgari if your goal is to play it right out the box.
Golgari is like the worst one. And then like, yeah, like you can just chop the Murmuring Mystic and the Arclight and stuff, and then just play the Drake's deck. Go get some Terramanders. Although I hear Terramander is like $5.
It has really been creeping up in price, I think, because it's been showing up more and more in older formats. I think right now it's at $3. It was a little higher than that, but it's leveled off a bit. But yeah, it's been seeing some legacy in modern play, which is definitely helping prop up the price. It was like 50 cents a month ago or something, so.
Yeah, I realize I should probably also just go dump all my Terramanders because I don't want them.
Alright, well, speaking of older formats, we had a triple modern tournament weekend this week. We had 2 Grand Prix. We had a Grand Prix in Balboa over in Europe, also a Grand Prix in Tampa, Florida, and there was a SCG Modern Team Open in Philadelphia. So, Crim, why don't you give us a quick overview on the modern action this weekend?
I guess we could start it by like the first tournament, which is Grand Prix Tampa that I have pulled up. We have Grixis Death Shadow. Here we go. Get this. So Grixis Death Shadow wins this tournament, but follow up, surprise, Is It Phoenix? And then it's Boggles. Then it's Is It Phoenix? Is It Phoenix? Is It Phoenix? And then Lantern Control, and then Tron. And then we'll just lightly go over the other ones where Is It Phoenix won, in Bilbao.
Yeah, there you go.
And then Philadelphia SCG Open was also won by Is It Phoenix. And then the Classic for SCG was won by Grixis Death Shadow. So, you know, these events are split right down the middle between the winning decks, but mostly there's a lot of Is It Phoenix, and then there's even more Faithless Lootings.
Yeah, because there's quite a few Dredge floating around in the top 8s of these events too, which is the other big Faithless Looting deck. I think someone broke down the numbers. They published for one of the Grand Prix all the day 2 decks, and I think it was like 22% Phoenix, which in standard, that's not that surprising for the best deck in the format, but in modern, a lot of times the best deck is like in the 10% range, which means 22% is really high for modern for a tournament. So, the Phoenix deck is definitely good. I gotta give a shout out to Sam Black, the Lantern. Sam was one of the people that helped popularize Lantern Control and has played it for a long time. But it's funny because I haven't seen anyone play Lantern Control. I thought everyone that thought playing Lantern Control was a good idea played War Prison now. But Sam just still Lantern controlling people, still having success with it, with main deck Kaya, of all things, as his finisher. So pretty sweet to see Lantern Control doing well in the format again.
With Kaya. I'm just like so happy like Kaya like finally is getting somewhat, like Sam Black's got a second Kaya out of the sideboard too. So that's pretty cool. And Unmoored Ego. I see 2 of those.
It's pretty spicy with like Pixis of Pandemonium and stuff. You actually have a weird number of ways to incidentally exile your opponent's cards. So you kind of power up Kaya's ultimate and just hide behind Bridge. And I expect you actually win with Kaya pretty often in this deck.
Oh yeah. Surgical Extraction will also help with that. Ripping like 4 copies of certain cards. Like, it's pretty sweet. I've been seeing like mostly, like with the Eldrazi and Taxes in Modern playing Kaya, which is okay there, I guess. But like in Lantern Control, that actually makes a lot of sense It makes so much sense out of Lantern Control.
Yeah, if Kai is a card where I feel like if you can play her on turn 2 in Modern, she gets so much better, because then you're actually fast enough to potentially be exiling Phoenixes before they're killing you and whatnot. And Lantern, thanks to 4 Mox Opals and a million cheap artifacts to turn them on, it's actually pretty consistent at having 3 mana on turn 2. So it seems like a really sweet fit there. So cool deck building, and kind of evolution there from Sam. Otherwise, what do you think of this Phoenix deck, Crim? This has kind of been a topic of conversation. We just had the ban announcement, no changes, which we kind of all agreed last podcast makes sense with Modern Horizons and this Mulligan test coming up. With this Is It Phoenix deck, is this one of those cases where the format's going to adjust and it's going to fall down and not be a top tier deck anymore? Or is this more a Splinter Twin where the deck is just so good the format can't really adjust to it, and it's so resilient, it's still going to be one of the best decks in the format, even when the meta adjusts?
I think that, honestly, when the meta adjusts, it'll still be pretty good. Like, everyone will just, kind of like how Splinter Twin, everyone just adjusted by playing Splinter Twin.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's how they adjusted, right? Like, that, I was like, well, everyone's on Splinter Twin, and right now everyone's on Is It Phoenix. You can load up with like a bunch of like main deck graveyard hate. Like you'll see the blue-white control decks that play main deck Rest in Peace. And yeah, it cuts out the Phoenix and whatnot, but it doesn't stop like Crackling Drake, Thing in the Ice. And like, you always think, oh, it'll be fine, right? Like, Thing in the Ice, there's no way. It's about to be their turn 3. How likely are they to flip it? But by now, I'm so used to them flipping it if you don't kill it right away.
Yeah. No, I think that's what the deck is designed to do, basically, is flip a Thing in the Ice really quickly, along with get back to Phoenixes. I think one of the scariest parts of this deck is, in some ways, it's starting to feel a little twin-ish, because it can actually, after sideboarding, if it wants to, it can just level you and take out anything that cares about the graveyard. It can take out the Arclight Phoenixes if it wants to, similar to how Twin used to be able to sideboard out the combo. And you see a lot of these decks with like Karanoses and Young Pyromancers and Jaces and more copies of like Pyromancer's Ascension. So it can kind of go around your graveyard hate in game 2 and game 3. And basically play like a weird, like, Thing in the Ice control deck, essentially. Like a weird Is It cantrip control deck with a bunch of removal. And then you have all these dead graveyard hate spells. So it feels like just being like, okay, I'm gonna bring in 6 graveyard hate spells, and I'm gonna stick it to Phoenix. I don't even think that plan works with how the decks are constructed now, because they are built with this in mind, and with a sideboard plan that completely minimizes the impact of you bringing in a bunch of graveyard hate.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's able to still stay around, but the graveyard hate does help. I mean, the funny thing though is how you're seeing nowadays that like so much main deck Surgical Extraction. And I think that's just where Modern is right now. A card like that works. And specifically in a Phoenix deck where, hey, another free spell. Like at instant speed, like Surgical Extraction, I think that they're like, what is that? Right. I'm looking at the list by Matt Costa and it says like 2 of them are $125. Yeah. So, oh my gosh. Surgical Extraction is so expensive right now.
Yeah, it is ridiculously expensive. And it's like that on Magic Online, too. I think it's like almost $70 a copy on Magic Online, which is just absurd. So, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think I've seen people talking about bannings. People have still been talking about bannings, even though we just had a banner restricted announcement. I said this on Twitter earlier. I'm very firmly in the camp that we just need to wait out the London Mulligan rule test and wait out Modern Horizons before making any changes. And then I do feel like after that, if we're still seeing things be basically like they are now, then I think cards like Faithless Looting should be on a pretty short leash as far as how quickly they would get banned. Like, if they survive all these format shakeups and it doesn't change anything, then I would be more on board with alright, let's just ban Faithless Looting, be done with it, or whatever.
Yeah. That, I also am in agreement with that. I mean, I wanted some things, like there was like things I just kind of wish they were banned when the last BNR came out. But at the same time, much like everyone on the podcast had mentioned, it makes no sense to ban stuff right now before London, when we're testing out a Mulligan rule, and we'll see what happens, right? Will other decks rise up or not? Do you think Is It Phoenix will still be a top tier deck after the London Mulligan?
I think Is It Phoenix is a deck that it doesn't benefit as much as some decks from the London Mulligan rule, but I think it does benefit to some extent, and it's so good right now that even if some other decks get better, I have a hard time believing that the London Mulligan rule is going to destroy Izzet Phoenix by any stretch. Like, maybe some like tier 2 decks crop up towards tier 1 as a result of the changes, but I still think that Izzet Phoenix will be near the top of the meta because in some sense, it is a deck it has so many cantrips that really you can't get away with a lot of mulligans in this deck because something like Thing in the Ice or Arclight Phoenix in your graveyard can undo a lot of mulliganing. So being able to mulligan into your Faithless Lootings or Thing in the Ice and some cantrips is pretty powerful in the deck.
Yeah. It's definitely the thing. Like, Faithless Looting gets you to go through the deck, and like also like the rest of the cards as mentioned, like Serum Vision's Opt, Thought Scour, throwing away Phoenixes is one of the scariest things you could probably see. So yeah, like I think even with the London Mulligan, Izzet Phoenix is still going to be just fine. It's more of like what decks rise up and can try to keep it down, and I don't know what deck will do that currently.
Think out of
Modern Horizons is the one thing that I think could make or break that or change things if anything new comes out in Modern Horizons.
That's a really good point, and we just don't really know. And maybe like looking at this format, I think the card that I want most it'll probably be a new card because I can't think of an already existing version, but some sort of 1 mana main deckable graveyard hate spell would go a long way in this format towards actually slowing down Phoenixes and Dredges, like almost like Dryad Militant, but hitting on all permanents or hitting on creatures rather than hitting on spells. Something like that would actually go a long way towards improving the meta. I've seen some people say Deathrite Shaman. I don't think we actually want Deathrite Shaman unbanned and modern, but something similar to that can fight the graveyard and be fast enough on turn 1.
What about some sweet split cards, kind of like how they were done in Ravnica Allegiances, where they're like one side can just be something that deals with like graveyards entirely. Ooh. And then like for like like a one-off, like exile all graveyards, and then the other side can just be some actual useful spell.
Yeah, like if you had a split card that was like Path to Exile and Ravenous Trap. Yeah, I would be all about that. Is actually a really good suggestion. That might be the way you can do it, is to tack on free or really cheap graveyard hate to something that is main deckable anyway. I really like that idea, Crim. That's a good one.
Yeah, like I think that'd be really cool. Because of the way they designed the split cards in Ravnica Allegiances, I really loved it. The way they designed was just like where both, like one, the front side is playable and then the other half is just like, it's these corner pocket cases, but it just allows you to have versatility in all your cards.
So, Crim, before we move on and hit up all this fish mail, and we got a ton of it this week, you're going to go play Modern. What are you going to play in this metagame? Is there anything that you think is particularly exciting for you to fight against? Phoenix decks, also Dredge decks, I guess, and then the secondary categories, kind of like the Ancient Stirrings decks, I guess, are kind of the second tier with like Tron and Hardened Scales Affinity. What do you bring into a Modern tournament in this meta?
Me? Like you're asking me?
Yes, you personally. You're going to say yes for Control. I know it. It's got to be a Teferi deck.
It actually, like, yeah, like it is. I mean, I like playing the fair decks, so that's why. And my decks have been tuned to like fight against these decks, like the Dredge and like, the Phoenix decks. I even play like Settle the Wreckage, right? Which helps against the Phoenixes. And having things like Path to Exile is a hard answer. And, being on Esper allows me to also have like other removal spells, even because like you'll see Phoenix decks like just extract your path, right? And then after that, and it's like, well, I'm out of Path to Exiles, so I can only condemn if I'm on blue-white and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I outside of like the fair decks, not gonna lie to you, I can't really beat them. I'm probably gonna join them.
Gonna play some Phoenixes of your own.
Yeah, that's how I beat the Phoenix deck, by playing the same deck and just doing that.
Yeah, just draw more Phoenixes. Easy.
Yeah, like how can I play Faithless Looting? Let's ask that question.
Yeah, I'm really high on Mono Red Prison right now. I feel like the metagame, Mono Red Prison has been my pet deck for years now, and it's a deck that gets better and worse, mostly based on how good Chalice of the Void is in a format, and it was really bad for like, I don't know, up until a few months ago for like a year. It just wasn't a great time for Chalice of the Void, but now with what we see in the top of the format now, Chalice of the Void is actually super good against Phoenix decks, assuming they don't drive Pyromancer's Ascension, which is like a 1 of, maybe a 2 of, but you could Sorcerer Spyglass that. But I'm really high on Mono Red Prison, just like Blood Moon and Snaring Bridge, Chalice of the Void, really good at shutting down a lot of the best decks in the format right now. You kind of hit on the Tron decks, you hit on the Phoenix decks, Bridge is really tough for Dredge decks to beat a lot of the time, especially if you can sneak some Graveyard Hate into your main deck, so that's kind of the deck that I'm working on and kind of tuning up for the meta right now.
Yeah, like that's definitely true. Like all the chalices right now that are running around are so powerful, especially on 1. Like just the sweet number right now is just Chalice on 1.
Yeah.
You'd also make Boggle players really sad if you put it on 1.
Yes, Boggle players have the worst time. That's what I used to love Mono Red Prison the most. It was back during around Eldrazi winter time, and Infect was a really big deck. Boggles and Eldrazi were really popular, and boy, the combination, like all the top decks in the format, they either were just stone cold to Blood Moon on turn 2, or they just could not beat a Chalice on 1. And oh, it was lovely. It was so much fun.
Yeah, not many things are coming out of Boggles. Like Core Spirit Dancer, I guess, is the thing that you can do to get around it. And Dryad Arbor, and that's about it. But all your enchantments are 1, so you have to and yeah, Infect, oh, that felt so bad if you were on the Infect deck, except for you only had Blighted Agent to get around that.
Yeah, you had
your Ink Moth.
Yeah, and most of your pump spells are shut down too in your cantrip, so you're trying to Ink Moth Nexus become immense. You're casting spells into Chalice to get him in your graveyard to become immense. That's your game plan.
Yep. And if they removed it after you're 30 for 1, it does not feel good.
All right, so that's Modern. Let's move on and answer a bunch of fish mail. We have a ton this week, so we're going to spend the rest of the cast just plowing through as much as possible to make up for missing it last week. So if you'd like your own questions considered for a future podcast, make sure to send them in on Twitter, #mtgfishmail, and we will get to them on future episodes. So anyway, question number 1 from QDig on Twitter. Do you expect Modern cards, paper and MTGO, to go up or down with such a major shakeup as Modern Horizons could create? Should I sell cards now, or should I wait, or does it depend on the decks or the cards? So, Crim, Modern prices with this big shakeup, what's your take on that?
I would hold on to my cards. Some things will go down if for some odd reason there's some new cards that are printed that just completely hose a certain playstyle. But at the same time, some of these cards could spike up, and a lot of these cards will probably still retain their prices, I think.
Yeah, I think I am in that camp too. I think, if anything, I'm expecting Modern Horizons to generate a lot of hype for Modern and maybe bring some new players into the format, which, while yes, some cards will go up, some cards will go down, I think the general trajectory is probably going to be up from hype for the set and maybe new players getting into the format based on the hype for Modern Horizons.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. Modern Horizons, it's just we have the 2 cards or whatever, the few spoilers we have, and I don't know. I think a lot of things could happen. There's a lot of potential. So I'd say it's too early to sell anything.
Yep, I agree on that one. Next up, Crazy3 Drew on Twitter. I know there's not much known about Modern Horizons now. Do you think that Wizards is going to try a new Modern format on Arena using Horizons along with the current standard? So do you think there's any chance we see Modern Horizons show up on Magic Arena, Grim?
I don't think so. I would love it. I would absolutely love it. Beyond, but I just don't think so. Because what else can you do with it? You would play Modern Horizons and then, add the cards. How far back does it go? I think Shadows over Innistrad.
I think that's the latest set that we know of, at least, is Shadows over Innistrad.
Yeah, so it goes back. I guess this would be that Modern Arena, if you would, right? like the non-rotating format of Modern, where I guess you could try to throw in Modern Horizons and see how it plays with like Shadows over Innistrad and Forward. But I don't think it's coming to Arena.
Yeah, I would lean towards not in the near future. I mean, there's always a possibility that moving forward 5 years, 10 years, who knows what's happening. Maybe Wizards decides to start backfilling sets towards actual Modern, and then Modern Horizons would likely get in on that action. But at this point, I'm not expecting that to happen in the near future. I think when they launch the Arena Modern format, quote unquote, Standard Plus, whatever it is, I don't think it will have Modern Horizons or any non-standard sets, I guess, sets that aren't already on Magic Arena.
Yeah. I mean, but the cool thing is, you know, Modern and how popular of a format it is on their sweet new client, you know, like, that'd be pretty cool if it could ever happen. Just saying.
That would definitely be interesting. It's such an interesting topic. I still wonder how formats like Modern would work on Arena with like the timer and that, but I will definitely give Wizards a lot of credit that Arena has been steadily improving, and getting better. Stuff that was really problematic before, like cracking treasure chests, or treasures, not treasure chests, without timing out. Stuff like that has incrementally improved along Arena's life. So, maybe by the time they're ready to start putting Modern into Arena, the client will be more than ready to handle it.
Yeah, I think that kind of stuff can definitely be like fixed and kind of done away with for like bringing Modern. It's more, how are we going to get people to like get a collection? That's the thing that I'm going to be watching closely. If Modern ever were like that's the hardest part, right? How do we get all these cards, and how do we get people to get all these cards?
Yeah, I think my guess would be that if they did ever do it, it might be how they kind of did it on Magic Online, because Magic Online launched without having all the cards for even Legacy when it first launched, and they just kind of released old sets a couple times a year, 2 to 3 times a year, and they were available for draft, and you could draft and build your collection that way, and then I guess on Arena you'd be able to wild card for stuff afterwards. So I assume they'd have to do it like that, like slowly backdate sets, releasing 2 or 3 each year until eventually you have all the Modern sets.
See, like the thing that is Modern Horizons now, right? I think was something that they could have done to like bring to Arena, and then also just have like a bunch of reprints in them on Arena. Like, oh, well, there's like Tarmogoyf, Staples, because like, let's not lie. I mean, yeah, you do have to kind of make the old sets, but like, do I want everything in some of these old sets? No, right? I just want like a few cards.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I think on the other hand, I think part of why Modern is so popular is you can play so many janky decks and so many janky cards. So I've seen some people say, right, oh, we just like do a couple master sets with Modern staples and that'll be Arena Modern. And that would be like probably better than no Modern-esque format, but I don't think you would capture the feeling of Modern where there's like 50 playable decks. I don't know if you can get there from doing master sets or Modern Horizon style sets.
Yeah, that is also true. Like, you know, like finding like I think some of the funniest stuff in Modern is when you find like this random sideboard card that can like just dunk on somebody that you have no idea existed, right?
Yeah, that's part of the joy of the format for me, at least.
Yeah. All right. I definitely agree with that. It's
Moving on, 11 Vicious says, for a land cycle in Modern Horizons, what about legendary fetch lands? Pay 2 life, you fetch 2 basics of the fetch land's color, or how about a 5-color fetch where you pay 3 life to crack it? Would these be too good? I have to, my first response to this is, having legendary fetch lands does essentially nothing because your fetch lands don't stay on the battlefield, so I don't know how legendary is even really a drawback on your fetch lands, unless you're trying to like leave them out because you have Jace or something and you don't want to crack them. So I don't think that legendary is much of a drawback. Yeah, fetching 2 lands sounds incredibly busted. The 5-color one, I mean, you can get so many colors with your fetches currently. I don't know how big of a difference that would be, but I definitely don't think you want fetch lands where you can search for 2 lands.
Yeah, definitely can't have that. And much like you said, the legendary rule doesn't matter because I very rarely ever keep my fetch land on the board anyways. I like, that's the thing. I don't know what you would do. I mean, I was kind of just hoping they'd reprint like, you know, the Scalding Tarns and all of those just in this set.
Yeah. Well, so unfortunately, it sounds like we won't get any cards currently in Modern, but hopefully we'll get a reprint of those cards at some point, because Scalding Tarn, Misty Rainforest, those have been 2 cards that have been increasing in price. I think Scalding Tarn is back up over $100 now, which is basically as high as it's ever been in its history, and it was last reprinted Modern Masters 2017, which is only a couple years ago. So
I mean, the demand is there, so. Yeah, that's why I'm saying, like, Modern is so popular, you know, just if they brought it onto Arena.
Next up, Militia Bugler. When you are creating a deck list on the Goldfish website and showing specific versions of cards, how do you show foil basic lands from specific sets that are not promo art? I have no idea. I actually do not know the answer to this. This is the worst question for when Richard isn't here, because I think Richard would just be able to snap off the answer to this question, but I have never tried to put specific foil basics in one of my deck lists on Goldfish.
I've never even tried to put like specific arts or anything. I don't know if there is a way. I guess you'd have to figure out the set, right? And I don't know. Richard question. Coding question for Richard.
There is a way I know how to add specific versions of cards, but I'm not sure about doing it for foil basic land. So I'll try to remember this question, bring it back up next week when Richard is here. Next up, Captain WoW 26. I want to get my significant other to play Magic with me. What are some ideas of how I can get her to enjoy the game I love with me? Ooh. What do you think, Crim?
Ooh. Personally, I mean, they don't do dual decks anymore, but dual decks used to be sweet and like a good way to like get like a significant other into playing. Also just, I mean, I guess if you wanted to, you could buy, like with the announcement of the Challenger decks, you just go nab one of those, right? For like $25-$30.
Yeah.
You grab 2 of those and then just play each other on that. I mean, they're all like just don't get the Golgari one, but like all the other 3 are pretty sweet. So I would just run with those.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. Challenger decks, the Planeswalker decks aren't super powered, but they are fine for like learning and casual play. The other thing is Arena's really good for this.
Kits.
Oh, guild kits. That's another really good option. And I've definitely seen Arena be a good introduction for stuff. So I don't know, maybe do the dual decks or whatever supplemental product you want to first, but then maybe suggest some Magic Arena. You could even like draft together or something on Magic Arena, and it might be kind of fun, but that's a good way to introduce people to the game as well.
Yeah.
Next up, Mike Lee 38. PAX East is coming up soon. Is anyone from Goldfish going to be there? Well, Crim, I'll let you take this one away.
I will be there. I will be competing in the Mythic Invitational, so I will be trying to make sure I win that. And if I immediately get stomped, I will be running around and checking out all the cool games and everything that's always at PAX. So I'll be on the floor and just running around, seeing what kind of Magic related things I can get into. Probably gonna bring my EDH decks too.
Ooh, that's fun. Well, if, I guess, so either root for Crim to win the $1 million tournament or root for him to scrub out so you can play Commander with him.
Yeah.
One or the other.
One seems very, very nice. The other one's also still fun, but one seems very nice.
I won't be there. I don't think anyone else from Goldfish will be there, except possibly, Matt, who does some of our video editing, mentioned going down. So I don't know if you know Matt Fletcher, but I think he said he was stopping down. But Tomer, me, and Richard will not be there. So I think if you want to catch the whole crew, GP Vegas is definitely something we're planning on doing. So that would be the next one. And I think Tomer and I are planning on going to GP Niagara Falls the end of April. So you could catch us there. Next up, Captain WoW 26. Which land art is your favorite?
Lorwyn Cycle.
Ooh, I am a Mirage person. Mirage basics are my all-time favorite basics. So, Lauren, that's a good... The new border kills it for me. I will not even consider any land that does not have old border.
I mean, the border, I guess I'm not taking that into account. I'm just thinking of the art.
Just the art itself, yeah.
Those islands, I remember, I still have it too. My foil swamp. And it's super rainbow colored, and it's just the most gorgeous swamp ever.
Next up, Benjamin W. Thigh, Benjamin T. When the London Mulligan rule is tested, what exactly needs to happen for it to be a new official rule? And if the rule is enforced, but certain decks in the format end up abusing it, will we see a reversal? This is a really good question. And I don't think we know the official answer to this and what Wizards is looking for. My answer would be, I want to see Modern look more or less the same. I feel, for me, for the London Mulligan test to be a success and become an official rule, I don't want to see a major impact on deck building, basically. If we see a huge impact on the number of lands people are running in decks, the type of decks that are being played, I'm going to be skeptical of it becoming an official rule. On the other hand, if it does become a rule and certain decks are abusing it, my guess would be that we would just see a lot of bannings. I think that is, if they put it into place, I can't imagine they're going to backtrack in the future. I think instead they would just ban things that were problematic.
Correct. And I'm all for the London Mulligan, so I hope that gets implemented. And then, then they just ban out the problematic things that can abuse that, London Mulligan.
I'm still skeptical personally, but I am very excited to see how it actually plays out. And I'm hoping that it goes smoother than I'm imagining.
I mean, see, I don't play Vintage or Legacy, right? And when I think of it, I only play Modern and Standard.
Yeah.
And though, Standard, I think it's going to be a blast, right? I think that's going to be great for Standard. And then in Modern, I see where it can be problematic, but I'm excited for it. And I think it's still going to add a lot more play to keeping hands in the opener. Can I, what am I going to push back into the deck? All this other stuff. And it also makes my opponent, who will then be he's probably digging for Stony Silence, so I need to have something for that. Or am I gonna keep this hand that dumps all my artifacts, or am I gonna keep the hand that goes and digs for something that deals with Stony Silence, etc., etc.
Next up, Sandstorm 846. Now that we know which planeswalkers are going to be in War of the Spark, are there any that you want to die? And are there any in specific that are your favorites that you want to live? Are there any planeswalkers you're rooting for to get the axe in War of the Spark, Grim?
Getting the axe? None specifically. Which one that I want to, save the world? Tybalt. I want Tybalt to, be the most broken planeswalker. I want, so that this way he could simultaneously be the best and worst planeswalker of all time.
The Jace the Mind Sculptor version of Tybalt.
Yeah, I don't know, he'd have 5 abilities, +1, draw 2, discard 1 at random, and then Lightning Helix. Why not?
I think, for me, as far as Planeswalkers dying, I'm not really rooting against anyone, as far as hoping that anyone dies. My guess would be that Gideon dies based on the trailer, but I'm not really rooting against anyone. And sadly, a lot of my favorite Planeswalkers are already dead. Venser is my all-time favorite Planeswalker. I guess I hope Tezzeret lives. I really like Tezzeret as one of my favorite Planeswalkers, so I guess I'm rooting for Tezzeret to survive, but it'll definitely be interesting to see what happens.
I mean, I want Teferi and Jace to live, but Tybalt is the truth, right? Tybalt has to be the truth. That's what I need.
Now I kind of want Teferi to die, just to see what your reaction is on the podcast.
I'm gonna need a day off. I need to process this.
Next up, Aldamin 4610. With Modern Horizons on the horizon, wink, do you think that we will see Stifle printed? I actually just wrote an article about cards that could or could not be reprinted, and my conclusion was that we probably don't want Stifle in Modern. Stifle is one of those cards, when you read it, you're like, oh, this is kind of cool. I can, stop a Planeswalker activation, but really it's just stifle your fetch land on turn 1 and make you not play Magic.
I like the idea of Stifle. I don't know how bad it will be for the format, though. I don't think it's gonna be miserable, right? I mean,
people will adjust.
I mean, yeah, right? Okay, I get stifled out of a fetch land, but, it'll feel bad the first time that it happens, but, then you kind of hope to play around it. And, how much blue is there anyways outside of Phoenix? Phoenix will only have another 1 mana spell to play.
Next up, Doug Whitaker. Is it better to get get into Modern with a bad or cheap version of a deck that you want to play, in this case, Miracles, or to get a good budget deck? Personally, I have had more success in Modern playing optimal versions of rogue or budget decks than I have playing bad versions of tier decks. The problem with trying to make cheap versions of tier decks is usually it's the really expensive cards that make the deck work. So if you want to play Miracles, but you're like, all right, I'm not going to be able to afford Celestial Colonnade or Jace or Teferi, I would rather just play a good budget deck than be in that position personally.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all for, slowly building your main deck on the side while you just, I don't know, fling a bunch of burn spells or something like that, right? Because you could still just play mono red burn.
Yeah, that's the other nice thing. If you buy a decent budget deck for $100, that's not going to really keep you from building towards a $1,000 tier deck that you want.
Yeah.
Next question from Rainin Dark Rider. What is your favorite trap or gotcha card? I know mine. My favorite by far is Mana Tithe. You can't do it in a deck that has blue mana. You can't be a blue because then people expect you to have counter spells. But if you're in a non-blue deck and you counter something with Mana Tithe, it is the best. There's nothing better than your mono white deck just countering something.
I think my favorite gotcha card would probably be Shadow of Doubt.
Ooh, that's another really good one.
Yeah. Mostly just because, the meme, everyone, when you're playing Modern, you crack a fetch, and I was like, oh, what if I have Shadow of Doubt? Well, I actually do. So, you know what I mean? To be able to say that you actually do, the smile the opponent has from saying the joke immediately becomes a frown. And then it's like, oh, that's unfortunate.
All right. Last questions for the week. This one's from So Much Value. Says, what older cards that aren't legacy staples are you hoping for in Modern Horizons? Everyone's talking about the type cards that are already played in Legacy. So, Crim, do you have any just pet cards that even if they're not good or staples or whatever, you would like to show up so you can play them in Modern?
I'd have to think about that for a second because that's a lot of cards to think back on.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think for me, the cards that I would like to see that aren't really staples, they're not cards that are bad per se, but they don't really show up, would be Vindicate, I think is a big one. I think 3 mana kill anything, including a Tron land would be pretty spicy and interesting in Modern. Veteran Explorer is one of my favorite, not top 50 legacy cards, but it creates such interesting deck building and, unique archetypes with how it ramps you. I think that would be a fun one. And then there's a ton of, tribal cards that would be interesting. Various, goblins and elves and, so forth that aren't really legacy staples by any stretch, but they might do a lot to improve those tribes in Modern, like Gempalm Incinerator, that random zombie that you cycled me out with when we did that one match.
Gempalm.
Yes, stuff like that would be really interesting to see what it did to Modern.
Yeah, I don't know, Psychotog just for the fun of it.
That would be really interesting. Oh, speaking of Psychotog, you gotta have Upheaval too. You gotta have Psychotog and Upheaval, just recreate the old deck.
You definitely can't play it, but you can play it, but it won't be to the same effect that it once was.
Yeah, I wonder if Upheaval would be too good. Or if maybe it wouldn't even be good at all.
Big mana decks, right? Those ones that are going Utopia Sprawl and Arbor Elf, untap, make another man. You know what I mean? You can do that. That Upheaval can definitely... Yeah, Upheaval Tron could be a little unfortunate and fun, not really fun to play against, but Psychotog, that won't matter.
Anyway, I think that brings us to the end of our fish mail. So again, if you'd like a question showing up on a future podcast, make sure to tag it mtgfishmail on Twitter, and we'll get to more next week. So that also brings us to the end of episode 215 of the Goldfish Podcast. So Crim, thanks for hanging out. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to Spikes Academy for supporting the show. Check out their new course, The Art of Sideboarding. Super sweet, spikesacademy.com or spikes_academy on Twitter. So until next week, this is the crew signing out.